Welcome, wonderful listeners, to the Shadow and Starlight podcast, where two friends deep dive into popular romantasy books. We get into the stories, characters, world building, lore, and so much more.
I'm Kinsey.
I'm Kana.
I'm Sarah.
We have a very special guest today. Let's all welcome Sarah A. Parker, author of When the Moon Hatched. We are so thrilled to have you. Thank you for being here today.
It's absolutely my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
This is so unreal for us. The first time interviewing a New York Times bestselling author, and also it's the first time we're interviewing someone whose book we've actually covered on this podcast. So really excited about that part. We have some listeners I know that have been waiting and ready to hear from you. So it's finally here. We're so excited.
Yes. I'm so excited to can't wait to get stuck in.
Yes. So after our intro, we do a little thing we call Drink of the Pod. So I don't know if you're drinking anything, but we always share with our listeners.
No, I don't even have it. Can I steal anything from my husband's
Well, I've got a bubbly today, but that's it.
Oh, nice. I love bubblies. They're my favorite.
Yes, they're good.
I'm drinking a strawberry cheesecake milkshake.
I am drinking air. I usually have peppermint tea on me, so let's just pretend.
Yeah, you're drinking mead, like rave.
Yeah, I'm drinking molten mead. Look, it's fitting right now.
Awesome. Well, first we want to dig into the questions and really get to know you. So, Kenzie, I'll let you kick us off with the questions.
All right. So, first question. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and journey to becoming a writer, and when did you know that you wanted to create worlds and tell stories?
Of course. So, I've been telling stories, at least to myself, since I was really little. The way I kind of get to sleep at night is by dropping myself into a make-believe world. And every single night, I pick up where I left off the night before, or the last spot I can remember finishing off anyway. So I tell stories to myself all the time. It's the way I get to sleep. And so I think that transition into actually doing it, as a career was quite smooth for me. But in saying that, I never went to, I never went to a particular college to learn to write or anything like that. I actually started off doing fashion design, and I thought that would be the direction I would go. I went over to Italy on a design scholarship, and after college, that we call it in New Zealand, because I'm from New Zealand, I went to, I guess, Polytech, and was learning to clothing design. And after having my own little business in clothing design, and after having a few children, I kind of realized that I was at a bit of a crossroads, and it wasn't, I think, giving me the spark that I was craving. I was constantly still every day, despite the fact that I was designing and doing what I loved and what I still love, I was still feeling this urge to create, and it wasn't itched, so to speak. I was still going to bed every night and writing these stories in my head and telling these stories to myself. So that first year that I actually decided, look, I'm going to try and get these onto paper and see how we go. I'm just going to try and get these stories down. And that first year, I didn't tell anybody that I was writing apart from my partner. And I just gave it a crack, I guess. And I read as much as I possibly could. And I taught myself as much as I possibly could. And that year was the first year, I think, that I've ever felt completely, truly satisfied every single day with what I was doing. And I didn't have this urge to reach in any other direction, to paint, to draw, anything else, which I love all aspects of creativity, but I was completely satisfied. And then that's, I think, how I realized that this was it. This is what I'm meant to be doing.
Wow, and that's awesome.
So I think that transition was really natural for me. It was just always meant to be, and I'm just so happy that I guess took that risk, because it was a risk. I was doing something that I was doing well at, but I wasn't right for me. And I just listened to my gut and I gave it a shot, and here we are.
That's awesome.
People are interested in my stories.
Wow, that's awesome. You did design for a little bit.
Yeah, it's I've still got a taste for it. I've still got all the lot of bits and pieces and stuff all scattered around the house of things that I've done, but yeah, writing's my thing. It's definitely my thing. But to be fair, that has, I think, helped me in my writing as well, because it's, you're very much designing when you're creating a world too. So it's all sort of little jigsaw puzzle pieces that have built into what I do now.
Yeah, I can definitely see how your love for design infiltrated When the Moon Hatched because, man, it is like a masterpiece in world building. Like, just
Yeah.
wow.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, we know a lot of authors tend to be influenced by their personal experiences, kind of like design, like we were just talking about, and interests. So, what are some things maybe outside of design that inspire you outside of writing?
I've always been quite, I think, in touch with like nature and when I was brought up on a farm. You know, every literally I'd get home from school, I'd run up our massive driveway and have a snack, and then off I'd go and I'd toddle off around the farm and kind of just be with the animals, make up stories in my head, just be one with nature, I guess. And I think that lust for listening, I think to the world around me has really fed into the stories that I like to write. But also, so around about that same time in my life, my nana, she lived next door to us on a little granny flat that we had lifted onto our property. And so I would go over there and sit with her, and she'd do some baking or I'd bake with her. And but she had this table, and it was stacked full of fairy books. I've got them right there. And I would sit there and I would just flick through these fairy books and be taken to different worlds and all around as well. And I've got some of them sitting over there as well. She had little fairies and little magical bits and pieces, folklore, little gnomes like made out of moss and stuff. It was just like this magical world. And I feel like that really spoke to my soul. It felt that was kind of the essence of what I think now what I put into my stories is that peace I found in that little house with my nana
Mhm.
is I kind of go to that. Oh, sorry, it's going to make me cry. I go to that
Oh.
place in my head at least whenever I'm writing,
Yeah,
and yeah, it kind of takes me back to her, which is I think yeah, it's. Oh, I don't know
close
if that answers the
relationship. Yeah, it
question.
does for sure.
Yeah. I love that writing like holds a special place in your heart from childhood though. Like it makes it so much more special and like closer to home.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really cool and special connection. I can already tell how much you love your nana.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be. I think writing the stories that I write was it not for her and her influence on me. Actually, the interesting thing is, when I finished writing Moon, we had lost her by then, and I
Mm.
after I finished writing that very last word, and I won't want to say it for anyone who hasn't read it, but I mean, you both know that word that I'm meaning. I went and hopped in the shower, and I just crumbled down, and I just cried for like half an hour, and the main reason I was crying was I think I knew that I felt like I'd just written my soul book, and I was just so broken that she wasn't going to be able to read it because there was so
Yeah.
much of her woven through those chapters, and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah. Sorry, we're
sorry.
getting crying by the second question. Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well, thank you for sharing that. It's really touching to hear how personal the book was to you and that experience. So it's cool to hear.
Yeah.
pleasure.
Yep. All right. So I heard you earlier mention that you had kids and they were at school. So with your everyday life, how do you balance your writing with being a mother and a wife? And do you have any specific routines or habits that help you stay creative and productive?
Oh, balance. Balance is hard. So with my previous series, when I was two books in, I learned very quickly that I wasn't balancing very well because it got to a couple of months out of when I was needing to, actually, it was 3 months, when I was needing to get that book uploaded, and I very quickly realized that despite have the fact that I'd had a year with it and been working every single day, I still needed to give it a hell of a lot more time to get it to that point that I was happy with it. And I was also, primary caregiver of three kids while just, full time working as well and building these worlds in my head. It was after STEM, was it? No, it was after Flame. So I didn't leave the house for 3 months, literally. I didn't leave the house for 3 months nonstop. Josh started working home 2 days a week. His mum ended up coming to our house the other 3 days to help with the kids. And I think it was 3 days after I finished STEM, I went outside the house, outside the front door for the first time in 3 months.
Oh my
So
Oh.
gosh.
I was living on the couch. I was drinking like 10 just straight black coffees a day, just keeping myself going. I was napping. I wasn't sleeping. I was napping like in half-hour increments through it, every now and again. It was bad. Um, I then got flame out because I think it only took me 6 months because it was the second half of STEM, same situation I guess as it was with
Mhm.
Moon, where I had to kind of split it. But so I got that one out, and then Josh and I sat down, and he said, "Look, you're not coping." I said, "No, I'm not. I'm not coping. Like, I'm juggling too much," and and I was definitely not looking after myself. And so he decided to give up his career to come home and to be the primary caregiver of our kids. And the next book that I was supposed to write was Crystal Bloom 4,
Mhm.
but I there was this I think this huge weight lifted off my shoulders, and I was like, no, I need to write this other story that's been in my mind for the past few years. I've got to get this off my shoulders now. It feels right. This time feels right, and I didn't give myself a deadline, and that was number one thing that was I think most important for me is I gave that story that's room to breathe. And I think in doing that, I also set myself these tasks each day. So I'll be all right, write two really rough chapters a day, and think about the next one on my head or the next two in my head. Go over my plan and make sure I've got it clear in my head. So it was those simple tasks, and once I'd finished those simple tasks, I would take my hands off the computer, which is not something I'm usually good at doing, and go, all right, I'm done for the day. And whereas again, with STEM, although I was writing nonstop all day, I was getting less done because I was kind of just in my head. I was like, no, I've got to keep writing. I can't stop. I've got to keep going. So I learned through that I needed to set myself boundaries. I needed to go, all right, do my tasks, then take your hands off the computer. And somehow I seemed to move through this much bigger story much faster. And, able to cook dinner and spend time with the family in the afternoon. And just, I found a nice balanced beat. And it kind of allowed me to stretch my wings a bit. It's been a little bit different with ballad because I have been juggling a bunch of other bits and pieces as well.
Mhm.
I had a tour that was quite big in the US and UK, and that there was a bit of burnout that I experienced after that. So there's been other bits and pieces that I have been juggling, but I've still kept things the same. These are my tasks every single day, and
Yeah.
um, it really does help me. My problem is too much. I go, no, I want to do everything. I'm going to do everything. I'm going to not stop until I'm not going to. Sleep is not my priority. Living is not my priority. Uh, Communication is not my priority. Just my work is my priority. And then I burn myself out. So I have learned very quickly that I have to
Yeah.
set myself boundaries.
Yeah.
I'm exactly the same way. It's not fun.
No. You crash and plummet and you're like, huh, what happened?
Yeah.
Oh,
It's like
Okay,
the
yeah.
opposite for me. I'll like tell myself I need to do something and I never find the time to do it. So it's like
Oh.
it's
writing would
true.
be impossible for me right now.
You would
Oh,
sleep even
wow.
less than you do right now.
Yes.
Um, that's really cool that Josh was willing to give up his career so that you could really take a lead on writing. That's just like so amazing to hear. And I'm curious, was Khan inspired by Josh at all?
The interesting thing is, so I did actually try and write Moon twice prior to the time that I actually wrote it and gave it that room to breathe. And
Hmm.
it was while I was working on other stories. I was just tapping away silently at this other one on the side as well, because it was always kind of just picking at me. And both times that I tried, I hit a roadblock and I couldn't figure out what was going wrong, why the story wasn't unfolding for me like I pitched it in my head, and why I wasn't able to get to, because I'm a planner, why I wasn't able to get to these certain parts in the story that I was trying to get to. And I think that it's because at that time in my life, there was something missing from my jigsaw puzzle.
Mm.
So it's like once Josh said, no, you need help. I'm here. Like, tell me what you need. That kind of lit something inside of me. And suddenly I could see Khan so much clearer. And he actually came out different that third time than he had the first two prior times I'd written him. He was a completely different character.
Wow.
All the because I plan everything. I plan dialogue, everything, right? So it was all just suddenly I was like riding this horse and it was just going. I was like, all right, okay, this is the way we're going then. It wasn't me leading the horse, it was the other way around. So, yeah, I do think that shift definitely
Yeah.
helped to shape Khan into who he is,
Yeah.
today.
As soon as I heard you say that about Josh, I was like, it just reminded me of Khan because I think he places Rave above everyone else and is like her biggest cheerleader. And that's part of why I'm like slightly in love with him. But that's really cool that when that happened in your life, it really just like kicked off your story. That's cool.
Yeah, sometimes you
Okay.
just need those moments of clarity.
Yeah. Well, speaking of con, I think we should get into When the Moon Hatched now. So, first, we just want to talk a little bit about the world building and lore, because that was by far one of my favorite parts of it. Is the world building was so intricate and immersive, and the descriptions. Oh my gosh! I mean, I was just reading it, and I was like blown away just how vividly I can visualize it in my head based off of the writing that you're giving us. So, definitely one of my favorite parts of the book. Took me a while my first read to like understand what the heck was going on, but now that I do, I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, this is so cool. But I was just curious what the inspiration was behind creating such a vast and detailed world, and how long did it maybe take you to develop? And sorry, this is like a three-parter question. Did you pull any inspiration from any certain cultures or mythological tales?
No, the interesting thing is when I'm writing, I'm always trying to escape. I'm escaping reality. I'm like, get me out of here. So I definitely, I didn't purposefully, in any way, shape, or form, purposefully pull from anything else. I'm always trying to create something completely different. So this story, I mean, it was 3 years in the making. I mean, literally, I from when I first pictured this world that doesn't spin and those dragon moons, like it was 3 years of me building the building blocks of this story and walking through the world as if I'm in a as if I'm in a video game. So I would, in my stolen moments, while I would between, when I would be going to sleep, and I was writing again at that time, the Crystal Bloom series, but in the evenings or while I was driving, I was in this other world and I was walking those streets. I was learning about the law. I was learning about the magic system. I was working my way through things. And so for me, when I actually sat down and put pen to paper, that third and final time, what I did actually first before I wrote before I started it, that third and final time, is I sat down for a month and I got everything down onto a document. So I've got this huge document that's got all the law, it's got all these different titles and everything, everything's written under it. So I know exactly I knew exactly from that point onwards what I was coloring within. And so that then once I had that down, and then I started writing chapter one, and well, actually the prologue, it was all so solidified for me. I knew exactly. I knew the world. Like I knew the world as if I'm living in this world.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it certainly didn't come. It wasn't something that snapped into existence overnight.
Yep.
I've been building it quietly for a long time now, and but it needed that time. It needed that time. I
Yeah.
think it's and there is always as well. I think that that urge to, because I had spent so much time in this world and I had so much that I felt like I needed to give the reader. There was such a fine balance when I was writing those first number of chapters because I didn't want to overwhelm the reader.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very big, rich, complex fantasy world, and I'm very aware that that is quite hard to swallow when we're used to living in this world. So, I went through a number of reiterations with those first chapters, trying to, I guess, tame it down enough so that it is more palatable. Because I'm,
Mm-hmm.
again, very aware that it's a lot to swallow the first round. In the
Mm-hmm.
second read, it's easier because everything's a little bit clearer. But yeah, it's big, and I mean, it took me three years to to
Yeah.
build it up. So it's like expecting it to be understood in that first read through is a lot. But yeah, hopefully, it's hopefully it's not, I guess. So overwhelming that it's hard to swallow the story. I think
Yeah.
that was one of the main things that I had to go back and do is connect us with Rave earlier
Mm-hmm.
on, because originally when I was shaping the story, I was definitely overflowing, like packing too much in and not connecting us with Rave right off the get go. So that was one of the things I went back and did, was tried to make sure that we at least
Yeah.
had somebody to follow through, and that rather than getting tossed around the world
Yeah.
like a
I
parchment
think
log.
you did do a great job as far as that goes, like connecting us to Rave and getting us interested in her. That helped me because, like, the world building piece of it, like the magic system and the creators, I was like, I don't really know what's happening, but I'm just gonna assume that I'll figure it out later. And then I met Rave. I met Rave, and I was like, she is so sassy and crazy. And then
Yeah.
Khan entered the story. I was like, who is that? So I was hooked immediately, even though I was confused.
Yeah,
Yeah, the
sorry.
mystery
No,
aspect
you're good.
of Rave really kind of helped it not be as like me as a reader, like it helped me not be so focused on like trying to focus on the world building and the magic, and it was like giving me another side adventure. Like, yeah, I'm still learning the world, I'm learning the magic, but at the same time, like, what's going on with Rave? Like, what's the
Yeah.
secret? What's the mystery? I want to know.
Yeah.
It's interesting too because as you would have noticed, there's a huge glossary for this story, and
Yes.
so when I got to the point where I was publishing, I was like, do I didn't know whether to put it at the front or the back. I knew it needed to be in the story because I think it's important to, have that list of terms and like an easy flick back. But I didn't know whether to put it at the start or the end. And because I didn't want to A, overwhelm, but B, I wanted people to know that it was there. I decided at the end of it all to go, all right, I'm going to pop it at the front because if I have it at the end, then people might flick back and see the family tree, which obviously
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah. It gives
um,
away a little bit.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm very aware that, some people might pick up the story and go, "Oh my God, this glossary is so huge. Like, I don't know if I want to be able to swallow. I want to swallow this world." But I hope that, I when I had that beta reading stage, I had my readers, some of them read the glossary first and then read the story, and some of them not read the glossary and see if they could still kind of at least follow along the story a bit. So, because I knew it just needed to be at the start of that at the start of that stage.
Yeah.
And so hopefully it's able to be understood despite the glossary or with the glossary. Fingers crossed.
Yeah.
I think either way. I think I
Yeah.
read
But
maybe like half the glossary and I was like, you know what? I'll come back later.
yeah, I kind of skimmed it. I was like, let me just make myself familiar with some terms. And then as I was like reading the book and I would pop up on a term I never heard before, then I would go back and look at the glossary. So like that, it helped.
Definitely
Having it there
very
to
handy.
reference, yeah,
Hmm.
it helped for sure.
For sure. Yeah. I think every fantasy book should have a glossary, but
I love
Yeah.
glossaries. I
so
also
you're
love it
ahead of
when
the
they give
game.
like a rundown of what happened in the previous stories, and you're like, just in case, because we consume so many books these days,
Yes.
and it's like,
Hmm.
so yeah,
A nice recap be
yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Very. That would be amazing.
But yeah, speaking of the glossary and just like how complex your world is, how was it developing the magic system and when the Moo hatched? And what was the most challenging aspect of creating one that feels both unique and consistent within the world?
Okay, so the interesting thing about the magic system is I have been when I spoke to you guys prior to this about, or I'm not sure if we were recording at that time, but we spoke about when I was younger and I was writing. And I was developing these stories in my head. So one in particular story is something that I've been developing for years. I've just been wandering through this world for years. And that first year of my teaching myself to write, I started getting this story down, and this one particular story that I would always keep coming back to. And it's like, I mean, that I was learning, so it's it was needs a lot of work, or needed a lot of work. But so I've kind of picked at it like a carcass since then, because it's a good story, but it's like it's also there's so many issues, right? Because I was learning, and I was just really just getting things down and trying to and getting a feel for things. But the interesting thing is I picked at a couple of things that I put into my Crystal Bloom series, and it's almost like my soul story. The roots of everything that make me. It's gone into this very mushed up, like messy story. But one particular thing in that was this magic system, and it wasn't similar. It wasn't similar, but it wasn't the same as what I've got in Moon. But it had similar aspects. Whereas the gods or goddesses in this world, were the elements, and they had personality, and presented differently in this, or presents differently in this other, I guess, skeleton that I've got there. But I think all that comes from, and that want to create these these beings that are, these elements that have their personality, comes from my childhood, comes from wandering around on the farm, and feeling like the wind was my friend, feeling and that she was playing with me, feeling like when it rained, like the sky was crying, and feel like the dips and the dollops in the ground as I was walking through, like feeling like that was the ground's personality. It was sometimes it was sloshy and feeling like a certain way. Sometimes it was hard and rough, and sometimes it was stony, and you can fall against it and break yourself against it. So I think that has just always been part of me, and something that I've always wanted to tell and put into a story. When I was building Moon in my head those previous years before I actually started writing it, I was like, this is where this was meant to be. So and then I heard Claude's like internal voice in my head, and I was like, oh yeah, here we go. Okay,
Oh my gosh. Claude, you crazy bitch. One of my favorite
Yeah.
lines.
No, really.
Oh my gosh. That's awesome. I love learning about how personal this story and the world and everything
Yes.
is. I feel like it makes me want to like reread it again, even though I just finished.
I love that it's like not inspired by one specific thing. Like it's literally just your imagination.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
That's
It's
so
like
cool.
a patchwork of my life, I guess, coming into shape. So
Okay. Next, I want to talk a little bit about the politics. So this is usually one of my favorite parts of fantasy books is like the political intrigue parts. Kenzie's like the romance girly and I'm like the politics girly, but this is why we're a good team. So obviously the political dynamics played a huge part in When the Moon Hatched. So what inspired the political structure and the climate of this world when you were creating it?
the funny thing is, in real life, I stay as far away from politics as I possibly can. Like I'm always hiding from that stuff, right? Like to the extent where I don't follow any news on my Facebook or anything. Like I am like, get me away, get me out of here.
It's scary.
Yeah, and I think one of those reasons I think having this kind of growing up, I was always, how do I explain this? It's so hard for me to get this into words. Having this almost expectation, or these people that kind of were overseeing and saying, what you are capable of, or or almost saying what your limitations are, and telling you almost how to live your life, or saying, oh no, you can't do that. That's not for you. Or I've always kind of gone against that. I've always felt like, well, I want to sow my own path, right? And I don't want to be, I guess, told what I can and cannot do. I'm talking creativity wise and stuff, like as I was, in my art classes and stuff. And just as I was growing up, as I was finding out who I was as a person, as I was trying to, plod my way in the world. And I think being told how I should live my life and what I should do with my body and all those different things. It's always felt very abrasive to me,
Yeah.
and I've just shied away from it and hidden, I guess, from the world of my stories. So I think it's kind of been natural that in this world, the politics of it has come out in a shape that's like, well, there is a rise up against that, because that's
Yeah.
very much, I think it's kind of what I hide from coming out in that political side, but very in the same vein. So the whole backstory and everything of this story was written before I put pen to paper. So I've got all the history of this world, everything. And I've also, I think, find it very interesting in our world where there are these people that, always bite off more than they can chew. They always think, again, that they know what's best for everybody else. And that just doesn't gel well with me. So that, I think, is probably a common theme in a lot of my stories, because I just, no matter what I do, it seems to come up because it's never felt right to me. So yeah, I'm not a particularly political person, but I think there's certainly things that I grade against and that I don't like, and that is
Yeah.
one of them. Is that
So
feeling that other people, feel like they can tell us what to do with ourselves and where we fit in society and stuff. So
non-conformist in you inspired the
yeah,
politics.
yeah,
I love it.
yeah.
That's how I am too. I am super into politics. Unfortunately, it's what I'm interested in. I ended up studying it in college and whatever, and over here in America, it's kind of a it's a shit show right now. And like reading fantasy books where the
Good place
FMCs like
to
rise
start.
up against the
Oh
tyrannical
yeah,
governments, it's like cathartic for me.
Yeah.
I think that's why I love it so much.
Yep. I release a lot of female rage in my characters, and it just feels so good.
I think that's why I'm obsessed with them.
Yeah.
It's the opposite for me. I run from politics. It
Yeah.
confuses me so bad. And I just don't know. It's so much going on. So like I'm reading like fantasy books that has politics. I'm like, oh, this is cool. But like, what about the romance? Like, let's get back to that. Like, yeah, she's like sitting in front of the chancellor, like waiting for her like death sentence. But I'm like, okay, wait,
Oh
when did
my
she kiss the
gosh.
guy first?
Yeah. No, see, I'm like, see, that's I think why Moon is such this. It's kind of this blend of this like she's rising up, and she'll beat me. No, I'm I'm deep in book two. There's female character that's finding her worth and finding her strength, and it's against that sort of overarching. It's for me, but while also with the romance walking hand in hand, because again, like that's where I escape when I'm reading. So it is funny. It certainly wasn't purposeful. Like I don't go in there. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to write a story with this, with that, with that, with that. I sit down, I put pen to paper, and I go. So it's always interesting to see what comes out of me because I'm not going in there with a formula. I'm not like, oh, I'm going to have feminine rage. I'm going to have this, that, the other. It's like the characters end up telling me what they want to write. So it's always very
Cool.
interesting to me to see what sort of comes out. Yeah, I'm
Hmm.
along for the ride as much as you guys are.
Yes. Okay. Really quick question that's kind of off topic what we're going through now. Who is your favorite character to write?
Oh, question. Look, I've got to admit, I could write Rave forever. I really could. I think the reason is because she deals with emotions very much in the same way that I do. Like I stuff everything down. I'm like, you know what? I'm just not going to look at it. I'm just going to charge forward. I wake up every day and I'm like, what am I dealing with today? what messy thing is coming at me today? So I feel like the way that she attacks things, she goes about things, is very in line with me. So I just find it easy. I find it very, very easy. And saying that, though, there is a character that I'm writing in book two. That's a certain POV character. We get an extra couple of extra POVs in book two,
Ooh.
and I've really enjoyed writing him. And I think it's because he's a bit of comic relief, and despite some of the heavy stuff going on, and yeah. So I mean, you guys know it's Pyrox.
Oh my.
So
Yeah, I was about to say,
Oh
I'm like, is
yeah.
it Pyrock?
Yeah.
yeah. So it's been really cool getting into his head, and it's interesting. It's interesting.
I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kana
One of
always
my
like, yep, I already know what you're about to say. Kanan usually migrates more towards the like comedian of the
I
characters. She
do.
loves the comedic relief.
Yes. Kenzie's like the shadow daddy, like the really dark people, and then I like the con, like the protective, like the man bun gets me every time. And the funny people, I'm like, those are my men.
Yeah.
Uh,
Oh my goodness. Okay, I think we're
Oh,
still
it's
on
my
the
turn.
politics. Yeah.
I always forget when it's my turn.
Yeah.
So yeah, on the topic of politics and like power. So one of the things that stood out in When the Moon Hatch was the power structure and how it's so tightly woven into the characters' personal journeys. How do you create a balance between this and keeping the focus on a more character personal driven plot?
I don't, so when I walk into a room and say I'm meeting a bunch of people, I'm not going, oh, I wonder what they do. I'm not wonder what they do. I'm not determining. I'm not getting a sense of their character based on on what they do with their lives. Or I make eye contact, and like you'll notice this when I'm in a group room with people, I lock in, and I like to get to know their soul. I like to get to know what makes them tick. I like to know the shape of their soul. It's the same for me when I'm writing a character. I'm shaping them from the roots up. So if a character is completely defined by their power, by what they can bring to the table, I know I haven't done my job right, because that's not real life. we've all got these different facets. We're all shaped by, the nooks and crannies, by our wounds, by our scars. And so when I am developing a character, I'm not like, okay, this person brings this to the table. I'm like, okay, what was their upbringing like? What hurts have they got? I literally shape them from the ground up. And that's one of the things I sat down and did in that month prior to putting pen to paper that third and final time, is I sketched out the backgrounds for my characters completely. So I knew what made them tick. And again, sometimes a character will come along and it might not have been in my plan, and it's a side character, and I'm like, oh, so that's actually happened in book 2. There's somebody that's come along, and I'm like, okay, wasn't expecting you. And I'll always bang out a first draft, but then I sit with it, I push it to the side, and I go, all right, now I need to actually do the work, and I need to work out what makes this character tick. And then I'll go through and I'll rewrite the whole chapter completely, because again, I never want a character to be determined by what they bring to the table. I want us to get to know them. I want to get to know them. Otherwise, for me, it's sort of like, what's the point? That extra dimension comes with getting, like, looking in their eyes and sort of getting in touch with their soul, and quite often that's got nothing to do with with their powers or with their with their lack of it. There's a lot more there, and I think it helps me to give the characters that extra dimension.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job with that for sure. I mean, with
Yeah.
Rave being who she was in the Shade, and then she's a powerful assassin, and then Khan being the king of the burn, like they were both so multifaceted. You can definitely tell that you were focusing on their character plots, and loved it.
Yeah.
Okay, so next we want to talk about some themes of When the Moon Hatched. So I think trauma and healing are very central themes in book 1. I'm sure that'll probably carry over into book 2, because girls got a lot of trauma. I mean,
Yeah.
everyone's kind of got a lot of trauma. um,
Buckle up. Yep.
Yay, great. Okay. So, what was your process for portraying this emotional depth of the characters' healing journeys? And I wanted to know particularly with Rave, because I think she might be the most traumatized.
Yeah, there's a lot there. Again, I'm very much, even though I'm a planner, and I know I plan the things that are happening in the story, like the big plot beats. So I plan, for instance, when I was planning book 1, there were certain scenes that I was working towards, and those first 2 times I tried to write it, because I couldn't see myself hitting those scenes in the way that I wanted to emotionally. I stopped and started again, scrapped and whatnot. But so there are certain moments. So for instance, book 1, when Khan shows Rave something he's been working on, like that was one of those moments. The moment when Rave is tied to something and certain things come to grab her, that was another one. So there's this certain that very last scene where something comes in and there's that final word, that was another one. So there's certain moments that I'm working towards, right? But through that, I don't pre-plan the emotional journey. I know what I'm working towards physically, but I don't pre-plan how the character is going to move through their trauma and through their damage and the growth journey. Like I know what the wounds are, I know what they're working against, but I trust myself to work through that stuff, that emotional stuff, as I'm writing. And I think that allows it to be more authentic, because I'm going through it with her, literally every single moment, every realization, every time she's forced to face something in the eye, I am doing that with her as well. And so I feel it all very, very deeply, which I think is another one of the reasons why book 2 has taken me a bit longer to get through, is because it's been a very heavy book, and there's been a lot that has come to light for her, and she's working through some really tough things. And it's so that for me is I like that to be as organic as possible, because that's life, right? You can't pre-plan someone's emotional journey. Like, you go through the mess, and you have setbacks, and then you go through it in a different way, and you find the light, and it can't be pre-planned, I guess. I feel like you can't just expect yourself to I'm gonna be over that by this part of the story. Sometimes that's actually not realistic.
Yeah.
For you to go, oh, that character's going to going to be this version of herself by then. Sometimes that's just not how it works out, and sometimes actually what does happen is you're like, oh, that was always meant to be that way. So you just can't pre-plan. I can't anyway. I wish I could, but I much prefer to go through the emotional journey with the character, and
Yeah.
I feel like it comes out more organic that way. It hurts more though, because
I was
I'm
gonna say that sounds rough for you.
book 2 has probably been like there's highs and lows, right? So I'm painting this out like like you're going to come out of this the second story with this completely shattered heart. Like I'm not saying that at all, but it is a journey and there's a lot to get through. But yeah, it's there's a lot of goodness there and a lot of healing, and sometimes you got to feel the break to be able to, you got to notice that there's a break there and go, oh, actually that hurts,
Yeah.
to then realize you got to heal it. So yeah.
Nice. I do appreciate the heads up for book 2. I had a feeling it was going to be rough,
Yeah.
because I'm sure we're probably going to be learning maybe about her Firelark experience, and that sounds like a lot. So we'll be
Yeah.
mentally prepared by the time it comes out.
Yeah.
It's a
Okay.
journey, but there's good stuff too. There's healing as well. Like there's a lot.
Awesome.
So yeah, I love book 2. I love it. So I'm hoping that you guys feel the same.
Yes, I'm sure we
Nice.
will.
Also, like while we're still talking about her trauma, I love like a part of how you revealed it with the like different time zones, like her childhood or like her like growing up and then present day. I know a lot of people aren't like a fan of like the different time zones, but I love that because it just leaves space for mystery because you're like getting tidbits and then you're back in present day and you're trying to like relate them back and forth.
It's interesting because when I was writing, so I sat down for about a week or so and I wrote all those diary entries at once, as opposed to writing them in bits and pieces. And I was a mess that week. I was like every day my face was swollen from crying.
Oh.
But like I was very aware that some people struggle with with being whipped back to a different time.
Yeah.
So I tried to keep them, one of my main things that I need to keep them small. I don't want to overwhelm, but I need this to be known by the time we get to the end. Like I need this history to be there. And when I originally was working through the story, I was like, well, I sort of thought, do I need to do like a pre-story or something? Because there was so much information there. But then when I realized that no, actually, this was how it needed to happen, I was like, oh, I know I was away. But I was concerned that it was going to pull the readers away from the main, from the main plot too much and to be jarring. So there was a fine line between trying to figure out where these different parts of the diary entries was going to sit so that it didn't take away too much, and hopefully so it added to the current timeline. So that was very much like a labyrinth, trying to work all that out and trying to fit them into the right places, and so that they embellished what we're going through at the moment. And so hopefully it worked out all right.
Oh yeah, I thought
Yeah.
those were like seamless transitions for sure, and I
For
loved it
sure.
on my first read. I was like, okay, these have got to be the same person, and then I would read a diary entry, and I'm like, no, that doesn't work. They're not the same person. And then I would read some more. I'm like, they have to be the same person, and I would just go back and forth and back and forth.
Yes. Yes.
It was-
Kana finished the book before me. And so, like, when I was reading it, I was in denial the whole time they're the same person. Because I just thought it was, like, too obvious. I was like, this can't be. This is a trick. It's a trick. I'm like, I think I know what's happening, but, like, I'm scared to admit it. Because what if I'm wrong? I hate being wrong. So I never voiced it at all. They were the same person. I'm like, I can't.
oh my goodness. Yeah, we went on a vacation last summer together and we were reading it, and I was like further ahead in the book than she was, and I think I was reading chapter 35. I don't know if that rings a bell right off the bat for you, but I was sitting right next yeah, I didn't know if it would. Well, it involves a certain assassin straddling a certain king. Recall. I was sitting right next to Kenzie. I was like, oh my god, I think the enemies are about to become lovers.
I remember that.
Very funny. Oh, so good. Okay, which question were we on? I don't even know.
Oh, it's my turn.
It
So
is.
another thing that's present in the book is revenge versus redemption. This is a big one, especially with Rave and Khan. So, what do you see as the key difference between these two motivations, and what drew you to explore them in such depth?
Look, I feel like revenge and redemption, it's all very I actually feel like it's quite tied. So Raven Khan, they're very much on these he's been through some stuff, right, in this period of time that we know existed. I don't want to give away too much for those who haven't read it, but
Hmm.
he's been through a lot of these beats that Rave is actually going through currently. So he knows that kind of journey, that psychological journey that she's on. So he's very aware, without her knowing it, just how much she is quietly hurting. And that for me has been quite a powerful thing to explore, because he knows the support she needs, he knows what the help, he knows the help she needs, but he's kind of quietly there giving it rather than leading her. He's there as a support, because he knows that that's what she needs through this. She needs support, she needs a strong sturdy barrier, a strong sturdy structure beneath her to be able to
Hmm.
move through, what she's going to be going through. And I think that's what endears me so much to him, is that he's not telling her how to deal with her things. He's not there going, no, you have to go this way or that way. He's just there to support. And
Hmm.
I think there's been stuff that I've moved through in my life that I wouldn't have been able to get through them without that sturdy support from my husband. So, it's, I think there is, in a way, it's kind of, at least in the story, I'm singing a song of that being very much tied. But yeah, Rave, I think, especially with some of her anger and her rage that she's got in her right now, she's got a long journey ahead of her. And, she's kind of got to find the silence between the two. And yeah, again, I'm so deep in book two, so
Currently processing all those emotions, I'm sure.
yeah, exactly, very much so. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, next question. What was your favorite part of writing Con and Rave's romance?
Oh, I think that's an interesting question. I think that because there is this, and again, I don't want to give too much away, just for people that haven't actually read the story, but
Hmm.
because there is this history there, right? That's kind of the way that affects the way that Khan sees her, and it's that slow realization that she is actually a very different person now.
Hmm.
And but seeing how these people that are kind of, in a lot of ways, they're just drawn to each other, no matter what, no matter who they are, no matter what they've been through. Like they are, even in this alternate reality where she is not the same person, they're still drawn to each other. And I think moving through the storyline and having this past there, and then having this present, and kind of seeing the way that they still are so drawn to each other, was for me very, just, I loved working through that with
Yeah.
them. But I will say as well, though, all that aside, I think their banter, like I just that's the way that I guess, for me, that is my romance style, is banter. That's how I tell someone I
Yeah.
love them, is with
Same,
banter. You know,
Yeah.
same.
they just speak my language. So
Yeah. Yes. The
yeah.
banter was
Yes,
top tier.
yes, love it.
One of my favorite parts, it's interesting to hear you say that was one of your favorite parts of writing them. One of my favorite parts was it was like getting two love stories in one book, even though it's technically the same people. Like the chemistry was there in both, but getting to see them get to know each other when it's like two very different people, but also the same person. So cool to see it come along and to see them still be able to connect, even though they're different the second time around.
Yeah.
Same. That's where my head was at. Like you essentially wrote two love stories at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was very interesting as well, trying to make sure that that chemistry was felt through the diary entries. Was, I was like, I don't know how I'm going to tackle this without actually making it like a prequel, like a small story. But then I got in her head and I started writing those diary entries, and I was like, actually, no, this is easy. Like, they just, it was like, there was this magnetism that just came out really, really easily. So it's, yeah, I just love writing them. I love writing them as a couple. It's exploring like their relationship and their growth has been just one of the highlights of my writing career. Honestly, it really has.
It was
I
awesome.
can write them forever.
Oh, that's cute. Awesome. Well, next we want to talk about some character inspirations. So I know you kind of already hit on a lot of con and rave. So our next question is about Vea. Kenzie, I'll let you take it.
I was just gonna ask if I was gonna pronounce it right because you know me and pronunciations.
Did we
Okay.
pronounce it right?
You're good.
Okay.
You're good.
I get so scared. But yeah, Bea brings out a lot of humor and relatability to the story. So how did you balance her lighter moments with all of her trauma as well and the narrative of her past and what makes her such a fun character to write?
I so the interesting thing about Vaya is that I use humor to basically to basically move through the most difficult stages of my life. I always have. It's sort of, it is my backbone. It's kind of the way I swallow things, I guess. So for her, it came very naturally. I love writing Vaya. I really do. I got in there with her and when her first chapter, and I was like, I was nervous to write it because there is a lot there. Again, I'm neck deep in book two. Um, um, uh, there's a lot there. Like there's a massive backstory, and yeah, I was like, oh, gosh, this is going to be very interesting. But the moment my fingers touched the keys, and I was like, oh no, actually, this is it. Just she just came out in this way that shocked me, and I was away. So I don't really necessarily go in there with a plan, but I think because she's got a lot there, it's like she's developed into this character that was very easy for me to write because again, when there's a lot of trauma there, you just kind of, that's how I deal. I use humor. So yeah, look, again, I don't pre-plan my characters. I don't go, look, okay, they're going to be this way. I think it's always important to find a tether that connects you to a character. So there's always something for me, like even if it's a bad character, even if it's somebody who is, you know, like Rick, for instance. Like I have to, when I'm getting in someone's head, I have to go somewhere that connects me with them. And
Mhm.
so there needs to be something, whether it be somebody I know, a certain trait that they have that draws some sort of connection that allows me to at least feel their beat. But again, I'll always get that first draft down and then I'll go back. And that's usually when their personality really comes to light and when I really get to know them as that second sweep. So, but Vaya was different. She was immediately, I was like, oh, okay, here we go. She's easy. She's easy for me.
Yeah.
She's very easy to write. Yeah.
She's a little firecracker. I love her.
There we go.
So I don't know when you were talking, Sarah, and you were talking about the humor, it kind of brought me back to when we did our coverage on When the Moon Hatch, and I was so obsessed with Spangle shit, and I like literally found myself like walking around the house just saying, "This is some Spangle shit." Like
Oh my god.
it's like my favorite thing that she would say.
Yes.
I walk around the house
So
saying the
good.
same thing. So there we go.
That's awesome. I forgot about that.
No, you know
I
how
was
bad it
like,
is though. Like, this is how bad it is. I'm like, I'm like, oh, this day is, oh, the rise is coming, oh, the falling, it's slumber time. I'm like, oh, Chloe's crying, like Chloe's out there, she's hurt. Like we've got a cyclone coming towards us right now. I'm like, Chloe's going to be angry at us, like she's going to be whipping around. Like I literally, it's like I'm living this world. Like even when I'm talking at the moment, I'm like, it's hard for me to be like people. For me, it's folk at the moment, and you know what I mean. So I
yeah.
do the same.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's really fun. It's like living in your own book.
yeah, probably a bit too much, but if you were to ask my family, oh, yeah.
Okay, well, the next question was about Khan and the inspiration behind him, but I know you kind of already went into that a little bit. So we'll skip ahead to writing process. What was, and if you already feel like you answered this, or it'd be just a reiteration, that's fine. What was the most challenging aspect of writing this book?
I oh, I think for book one, for Moon, I think it was uh, again because I had such this huge world in my head, trying to get that across without overwhelming the reader. That was I very quickly realized that I needed to do a prologue that kind of gives at least the background of how this world was created and how the creators like fit into it, because I knew that if I didn't do that, then there was going to be a whole lot of confusion. But the funny thing is, writing the prologue was easy. It was then getting into the world and actually trying to get the basics across without overwhelming. That was challenging, and that did take
Yeah.
a few iterations. I think I went back about 3 times and had to revamp and cut chapters. And because I started the story earlier than I previously did. It was, we were in a different part of Gore. It was sort of, we're down in the ditch, and so I cut out literally a whole chapter and went, okay, what are the important bits here? And it's always hard when you've got to cut things away, but for me, it was important. We originally met certain characters earlier, but I changed that just to try and palette the world building a little bit more. And I think that's quite universal. I think that that when you're trying to bring a reader into a fantasy world, I think, I know that whenever I'm dipping into a whole new world, I'm struggling to quite often to swallow it. And so I feel like that's probably quite a common struggle that authors have is, going, oh
Hmm.
my God, how do I get this on page without stuffing it down the reader's throats and telling them? So
Yeah.
it's like you've got to find that fine balance of finding a way to show them the world without showing it. You've got to flavor things for them and move through this world like it's a video game with them. And that's a hard balance. It's a very
Yeah.
hard balance.
That sounds like a daunting task,
Yeah.
especially with how intricate the world building is in here and so
You just don't want
unique,
to
I'm
stuff
sure.
things down people's throats. It's like, oh, and this is this, and this is this. But on those first drafts, you always do, because that you can't help yourself. You just get
Yeah.
it down, like you're like, what? And then you've got to pare it back and go, no, hang on a minute,
Yeah.
what's necessary here?
Nice.
Well, I think you did
Very
a good
cool.
job though with that. And the prologue really fit perfectly. I found myself going back to it constantly to reference it just to see how everything started. So it helped a
There
lot.
are a lot of Easter eggs in that prologue. You'll realize that after you read book 2. There's a lot. So
Mm.
Ooh. Now I'm gonna
I'm gonna
like
go
go over and read the prologue
study the
after we finish
prologue.
this. I'm like, what is she talking about? Oh my gosh.
Okay. What was your favorite scene to write in book 1?
There are a couple, but I was always working towards that very last word. So getting to that very last word it was quite special for me. But if we're talking about a whole scene, I think it's a very good question. I think I would probably say we're talking about fun. There's different vibes here, right? So if we're talking about fun, it's when Ray was getting condemned, and and she's
Oh
she's
my
just
gosh,
mouthing off.
yes.
I love that scene. I just I was living my best life. But we're talking about romance and like angst and stuff. I loved writing it when she's in the cell and Khan comes, and
Mm.
there's that. Loved writing that scene. Loved writing that scene because there's a whole history there. So I'm like writing this like with him knowing, and her not knowing. Oh my gosh! And she's injured, and he doesn't realize how injured she is, and it's just like I was living my romantic angst just
Yeah.
life there.
Yes.
But I want to give special mention to the scene the one main scene that I was working towards that whole book, and that was the one where Khan showed her a certain something that he's been working on, and getting to that scene and being able to actually be there and feel the emotion and everything after the build up, because I never skip ahead, right? I write in sequence. So getting to
Hmm.
that scene finally was like the biggest breath of fresh air, because it was to me a really special moment. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry, that
Man.
was a very roundabout
No,
answer,
you're
and I
good. That was
No.
amazing. I love to
Yeah.
hear what was like the most fun for you to write. I feel like
Yeah.
I have so many favorite scenes, but what never fails to move me to tears is at the end when Leary comes in and that whole scene. I've cried every time I've read it. I just
I
can't.
Yes.
was a mess writing that. When she comes up and when she climbs and she comes across to her, and that I every single time I had to edit that scene or go through and like tidy it up or whatever during the editing process, I was just like, okay, all right, Oh, one of those scenes I'd always have to shore myself up for, and then like tuck myself into a corner so nobody watches me crying.
Nice. Well, I'm glad to hear you cried as well, because man, it makes me
Yeah.
emotional, but it's really a moving scene for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we have a few fun, lighthearted questions, so we can end on a happy note. If Rave and Bea were just hanging out for a night, what do you think they would be doing? Playing Scrippy, grabbing a drink, or something a little more dangerous?
I think there would definitely be some scrippy going on, but I think there would be some very high stakes. And I think there would probably be some drunken dragon riding going on too.
Yes.
That
They'll
would
be
be
like,
so much fun to read.
they'll be like, let's just go take out some baddies drunk. I think there would be drama. Drama that would
They'd be doing
unfold.
all of the above.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, be messy. The
Oh
good
my
stuff messy.
gosh.
If you could hear any of the creators in the book, which one would you pick and why?
I think, the interesting thing is, I have been asked this question before, and I feel like my answer's still the same. Don't know what it says about me, but so there's Claude for Rave is, she's easy for her to listen to because she's got this sort of this lighter way about her, right? Like Rain's different, she's deeper. There's this dredging emotion that she needs to feel to go to listen to her and to feel her language. And I feel like Claude would be my answer because sometimes I veer away from those emotions and those deeper emotions, those harder emotions to face. And I don't think that's necessarily a good thing. But I definitely stuff things down like Rave does. So I like to think that one day my answer will be Rain, but no, I think I'm still avoiding things.
Yeah, I don't know if I can handle rain right now either.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question. Is there a character or a scene you've written that makes you laugh every time you think about it?
Yes, it's in book 2 though.
Oh, darn it.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I can't wait to get to it.
Yeah.
I think I always laugh out loud when Vea is visiting the Velvet Trog, and when Pyrock and Rave are together. Anytime they interact, makes me laugh out loud. So funny.
Yeah. There's, I think as well when Rave is getting condemned, she's being
That
put to the
too.
stake basically. That moment as well. Whenever I would go over that one, I'd be in hysterics. But yeah, I think the Velvet Trog one is a very good answer. I had so much fun writing that scene. I'm not gonna lie.
I can only imagine.
People are just gonna read this and be like, "What the heck is going on inside this girl's head?" I was loving it. I was just live.
I am loving it. I enjoyed rereading it again just a few days ago when she goes down there and just like chewing on a chair. I was like, nice. I don't know why that made me laugh, but it did.
I love it, like any of Brave's stubbornness. Like when she's finally back at her old room at Khan's place and Vea's eating and she's like upset because she's hungry and she like refuses to be nice so she doesn't ask for any food and she just goes on hungry.
I love writing this. Yeah. I love those things with that. There's so many character interactions that I'm always like, I can't wait until they're in the same room together again. I just love it. So yeah, there's some cool moments coming up as well. So
yeah, I have quite the list of things. I'm ready for these people to interact again.
Yeah.
Okay, so we finished out the questions. If you want to do trial by trivia with us, if you can think of some questions from book 1, just off the cuff. I know I'm asking for a lot because you're neck deep in book 2, but we can totally skip it if you don't want to do it. It's totally up to you.
So it's something. So me quizzing you guys, is it? So something that. So do you what color or this, that, the other? Something about a timeline or something? Are we talking?
Ooh, the timeline would be a tough one, but I can try.
Interesting. Okay, hang on. Let me just. Oh golly. What? Okay, all right.
Okay.
What did Essie cook that Rave had some of when she got into their place?
I got it. Do you got it, Kenzie?
I remember, but I don't remember at the same time. I know you know though.
Was it Butterman Loaf?
Yes, well done. Good job.
I was like nervous when we were gonna do trial by trivia with you because I was like, if I don't get these questions right, and I've read this book like 6, 7 times, I'm just not a trivia girl.
I remember this being, I think, one of your trial by trivia questions when we were doing our coverage on When the Moon Hatch. I think you asked me that question,
I
so
think
I
you did.
remember, like, but I didn't remember the answer.
I've got another one. All right.
All
So,
right.
what is the name of the place where Rave went to unalive a certain somebody towards the end of the book?
Oh, I know.
Oh, this is also a question you asked me too, but I don't remember.
I'm impressed that you can remember I asked you this, but not the Well, was it? I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation probably. Bothame, the neutral
Yeah,
tri-council place.
good job.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you.
Golly, well done.
Oh my
Well
gosh!
done.
Thank you.
All right, now let me think of another one and try it. That's definitely book one and not book two.
Definitely.
Um, all right, let me think. What is Elowen's brother's name?
I know
You
this
got this,
one.
Kenzie. Get it,
I'm
get
gonna
it.
butcher the pronunciation too. It's Hayden or Hayden.
Very good, very good, perfect. Well
Yeah,
done.
girl, you go.
One
My
more.
trivia.
I'll do one more.
Oh, okay,
I'll
okay.
do one more. Sorry, just because it's onto my tongue. What is the name of the capital of the Shade? So we're basically where Elowen grew up.
I think I know.
What is it?
Is it Arithia?
Yes, well done.
Yes.
Good job.
Thank you. Well,
Nice.
I've spent a lot of time looking at the map. I'm gonna not say how long, but it's probably more time than a normal person should.
No, I love that. I love that.
Cool. Well, thank you for doing Trial by Trivia with us, and thank you so much
Yay.
for joining us. Like, truly a pleasure to have you on our podcast. It's a big milestone for us, and you're just such a cool person. And getting to hear more about this book and how it's so personal to you is just an experience that I will never forget, and I can't wait to reread it with all of this knowledge that I have now.
That's absolutely my honor. Thank you so much for having me and spending the time with me this morning slash this evening.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I forgot about the time difference.
Yeah,
and we
it's
can
great.
touch back again after you read book two.
Yes,
Yes,
we
we will
cannot
love
wait for
that.
book two. But yeah,
Yes.
that's a wrap on this author interview. Thank you, Sarah, and can't wait for the Ballad of Falling Dragons to release.